What are the true impacts for taxpayers when it comes to student loans? Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro approving a $50 billion budget for the new fiscal year, and Illinois diversity leader resigning, among other things that America is talking about. This is The States, powered by the Center Square. Today is Tuesday, July 14th, 2026. I'm your host, Esther Wickham, standing in for Greg Bishop. First, looking into education, specifically student loan and student loan forgiveness programs. Now, currently, America's student loan debt is sitting at approximately $1.8 trillion, and it doesn't seem like it's going down anytime soon. And while millions of borrowers continue to pay off their student loan debt, the majority of students and borrowers that are holding this amount of debt are those that have gotten their higher education when it comes to master's or PhD, but also that balance is still for those who dropped out of college that don't even have a degree, are still paying off their loans. Now, as the federal government remains one of the largest lenders of student loans, the debt itself remains enormous. Now, specifically breaking it down state by state, we have the top states holding the biggest balance, which is California, owing about $150 billion, the state of Texas, $137 billion, New York State, around $90 billion, and Illinois holding more than $63 billion. Now, at the same time, the delinquency rates with these states shift between 8 to 12%, meaning that certain individuals have failed to pay their balance or the minimum payments every month past the 90 grace period. And so as these delinquency rates skyrocket, Pacific Research Institute economist Wayne Weingarten told the Center Square that taxpayers continue to be on the hook. But specifically in California, we have some critics questioning the current administration and their decisions on student loans and student loan forgiveness. Peter Sado, who's the executive vice president for United Nurses Association of California, had this to say about the impacts on student loans from the federal government for nursing students.
Today, Americans carry nearly a $1.9 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. AB 2301 won't solve that problem on its own, but it is exactly the kind of practical solution that helps chip away at the problem. By giving more students the opportunity to earn a BSN at a public institution instead of taking a massive debt at a private one, AB 2301 begins to reverse the trend.
Now, the state of California is taking some steps to try and help these students as they decide whether they go to public or private schools. But at the end of the day, the Trump administration, as they continue to dismantle the Department of Education, has taken steps as what they deem a way to benefit borrowers and future students that are going to take out loans. Specifically implemented on July 1, they recently implemented a program that reduces the interest rates from 1%. Now, for federal loans, the interest rates land between 6 to 9%. It's kind of a fixed rate depending on the kind of loan that you get. But if you go to private lenders like Sallie Mae, College Avenue, SoFi, and other private banks, the interest rates can be as low as 2%, or depending on your credit score, skyrocket to 17.99%. And so the Trump administration has said that if borrowers enroll in automatic payments, in autopay, they can have their federal interest rates reduced by 1%. But that still doesn't make the discounts make an impact on borrowers when it comes to how much they still owe in student debt. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that taxpayers are still on the hook. If this 1% reduction in interest rates go through, it's going to be costing about $5 billion for taxpayers. And they argue that lowering the interest rates means that borrowers are ultimately still going to pay back less. And essentially, they say it's kind of like student debt forgiveness, which the Trump administration has been very vocal about being against, and they've rolled back a lot of what the Biden administration pulled out when it came to student loan forgiveness. And so a lot of critics say that these kinds of actions by the Trump administration are no better. They're kind of similar to student loan forgiveness. And so that conversation continues, but Andrew Gillen, who's a research fellow at the Washington, D.C. think tank, the Cato Institute, told the Center Square that America has more people with college degrees than jobs that require of them. So there's this question of, we're sitting with a very high number in student debt portfolio, but what exactly is that return on investment? While about 38% of Americans have graduated with a college degree or higher, master's degree, PhD, only 25 to 28%, as he says, of jobs actually require a degree. And so the question is, as the Department of Education continues to dismantle itself and the administration continues to implement various limits and restrictions on student loan forgiveness and different programs, what exactly is this going to do for future borrowers and current borrowers when it comes to taking out loans? Are they going to roll back being the biggest lender in the country, and will more students go to private lenders to get their student loans? More on this as you go to our website at the Center Square to look at more education stories and developing. This is The States, and we'll be right back.
We have 673 pages of budget-related bills. We got access to at 7:30 last night. It's just really hard to get through 673 pages, understand all of it, have our constituents give us input, then decide how to vote on everything. But based on what I know about this, I can't support this irresponsible spending plan.
Welcome back to The States. I'm your host, Esther Wickham. Pennsylvania lawmakers on Sunday approved over $50 billion budget for the 2026-27 fiscal year after getting a signature from the governor, Josh Shapiro. Here to talk a little bit more about it, we have here the Center Square's Northeast Regional Editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, it seems like there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to this budget. So I think starting out, it'd be great to hear from your perspective, what are the big takeaways that taxpayers can realize in this budget approval?
All right, so top line number is $50.8 billion. It's a little less than what the governor wanted to spend. It's a little more than what Republicans wanted to spend. And there's a lot of the typical stuff in there, more money for public education, more money for mental health and for human services and Medicaid and all those kinds of things. What's not in there might be the bigger news for taxpayers, and that is a lot to do with regulations around data centers, skill games, and whether we're going to legalize recreational marijuana, and that's just a few.
Yeah, and aside from, the things that they kind of left out, specifically the things that they approved and kind of included, there was some debates amongst Republicans and Democrats. The approval was 167 to 35, which a majority or all of the 35 dissenting were Republicans. Could you kind of talk a little bit about what were some of the responses and reactions to the budget proposal on Sunday?
A lot of the no votes came from the position that the idea that the budget was balanced and met in the middle was really just a farce, that there was a lot of accounting tricks to make it look like the budget was balanced, and that rather than raiding our emergency savings fund, lawmakers picked up the couch cushions and shook them for every penny that they could find. And they also pushed forward some spending so that it wouldn't appear in this year's books and be pushed to next year's books. So for those lawmakers who just wouldn't vote for it, that was their big concern, was that there was nothing balanced about this. It's really just PR tricks.
Yeah, and kind of going back to that idea of you saying that there's a lot, being not talked about or untouched, not really looked into. Why do you think that is? Is it something where it's just there's too much of a gap between a conversation that they couldn't even begin to discuss these various issues like data centers, to maybe even find common ground, and maybe they just will push it to next year's budget approval?
Certainly that seems to be the trend of what's happening in the legislature over the last few years. Last year, our budget was 4 months late. And a big reason for that is because they were really trying to hammer out issues that they just couldn't agree on. And this year it was only 12 days late. So it appears that they really abandoned that strategy and opted in favor of getting something passed that was agreeable rather than trying to decide all of these big questions. The problem is that they left a lot of money on the table, potentially, that could have been used to help fund some of these increases in spending. Things like, again, regulating skill games in Pennsylvania, which are like slot machines, but different in the sense that it's not just pulling a lever and wishing for the best of luck. There's more skill involved, as the name implies. So taxing those could have brought in roughly $300 million, depending on what tax rate there was. If we had taxed recreational marijuana and legalized it, there would have been another couple $2 billion, depending on whose estimates you looked at. So these are things that were always hard for the legislature to come to common ground on, and it seems that they have again punted.
Yeah. And as you said before, there's about a $7.7 billion amount for, as they say, a rainy day fund. And you kind of note that this is a priority for Republicans. Why is it a priority for Republicans to kind of have this big chunk of money left for, a rainy day?
They see this as the state's backstop to big tax increases, and along with it, severe budget or severe program cuts, or, a combination of both. It's, like I said, it's our emergency savings account. It's only supposed to be touched in times of severe economic downturn or extraordinary circumstances, like COVID-19 would have been a great example of that. And we've worked hard in the state to really build this savings account. We went from $234 million 5 years ago to now nearly $8 billion. So Republicans have been really insistent that we stop taking the money out of our savings account to cover spending that is just going to keep growing year after year. And that's something that we would avoid in our personal lives too. We wouldn't keep raiding our savings to pay the electricity bill every month, knowing that cost is going to go up and up and up. So this is in the similar vein. It's just at a multi-billion-dollar level.
Yeah. And finally, one big issue that I think is a major, conversation in all states is the conversation on education. Now, it looks like Pennsylvania's budget definitely continued major increases for K through 12 education, but I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on where Pennsylvania and where taxpayers are at in regards to opting in for school choice. There seems to be a bipartisan support between Republicans and Democrats within the state for Governor Shapiro to, sign in to opt in for school choice. It seems like there's an increase in, education funding within this budget, but it doesn't seem like the state or Shapiro is going to move anytime soon when it comes to school choice. From what you're seeing, what could we potentially be looking out for now that the budget's been approved and we're moving forward with education spending?
For now, as far as school choice goes, it's very quiet. Shapiro has refused to answer whether he will be opting the state into the federal program. Pennsylvania has a state program that is very, very similar. We've increased funding for that program to over $600 million over the last 10 years. That is something that was left out of the budget as far as an increase goes. Instead, another $500+ million was given to public schools. That's a pretty good indication of the dynamics at play, in the sense that Democrats historically support funding public education, and Republicans are very supportive of school choice and increasing funding for those programs. And as you pointed out, there is bipartisan support to find somewhere in the middle. And in fact, Democrats have voted for budgets that increase school choice spending in Pennsylvania. So there is, again, this is another issue that is coming to a head in Pennsylvania. And in fact, there was some talk from Democrats in the House, where they have a very small majority, about whether we should be spending the amount of money that we spend on school choice tax credits, or whether that money would be better spent somewhere else in regular education, public education. That didn't come to pass. There was no repeal, but it hints to the thought process behind where the parties might be moving on school choice. And one can't help but wonder, where does this tie into the federal program? And again, Shapiro's been quiet, so we just don't know what Pennsylvania's future is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye out for those developments, what kind of comes about since this budget's now approved. The Center Square's Kristen Smith, greatly appreciate your time. For more stories like this, whether that be in Pennsylvania or other states around, you can go to our website at thecentersquare.com. We'll be back for more. Welcome back to The States, powered by the Center Square. I'm your host, Esther Wickham. Quick hits from America's Talking, with headlines from across America. If you would like to read more of these stories, the articles will be linked in the description below. Starting out with the state of Michigan. Michigan and Canada, the country, have agreed to open the Gordie Howe International Bridge on July 27, so just next week, which is a major new Detroit-Windsor crossing expected to boost trade and reduce congestion, while this country, Canada, says it will retain all toll revenue under a revised agreement that includes a shared economic development fund. Next, in the state of Illinois, Alexandria Wilson, head of Illinois' Commission on Equity and Inclusion, has left for a new state job following bipartisan criticism over the commission's management and a commuter system overhaul that cut the number of certified disadvantaged businesses eligible for state contract preferences by about half. Next, out of the national angle, we have a coalition of conservative legal groups is urging the Senate Judiciary Committee to investigate U.S. Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan should she recuse herself from an upcoming climate case, arguing that her involvement in a 2025 climate science reference manual demonstrates bias in favor of climate-related litigation. Next, on the national angle, we have the U.S. House is set to vote on the Sunshine Protection Act of 2025, which would make daylight saving time permanent year-round, despite opposition from major medical, education, and safety organizations that argue that permanent standard time is healthier and safer. While some states in the country have implemented this permanently, this is a question of whether the whole entire country should make daylight saving time permanent. Well, from my studio here in California, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Esther Wickham. We'll be back on Wednesday looking at more stories that impact you, the taxpayer, only here on The States.